A few handouts, and we're going to wait a few minutes because it's just after lunch, so people might be back a little bit late. How are you? Everyone have a good lunch? It was a...
So we're just waiting for it?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for coming to our presentation today. My name is Bethany Erickson. This is David Knapp, and we're from Grand Valley State University. And yes, we are undergraduates. Today we're talking about MySpace and how it can be used in literary classrooms. I know there's some of you might know there's a lot of fear surrounded around MySpace with how it's portrayed with news sources, but we think that it provides a really amazing type of technology that's perfect for character exploration. So I guess the first reason, and maybe the most obvious, why you might think about MySpace as being a good place to explore characters or use in the classroom, in a high school classroom, is just the fact that high schoolers are familiar with MySpace as a social environment. You might even argue that students are starting to think of social interaction in terms of some of these social networking sites and how they work. In addition to the familiarity, though, we really think that MySpace provides smaller spaces within the technology of MySpace that lend themselves well to character exploration. We look at these spaces in terms of all the different things you get with a character. You get the surface areas which they're presenting to each other, and that's kind of how when we meet someone, we're introducing ourselves, saying this is who I am, as well as some of those deeper layers of character dialogue and character reflection, where you're getting into character thoughts and deeper things like that. Now, before we get into in order to talk about MySpace, we've prepared examples from two different books. The first one being Feed by M.T. Anderson. It's a newer young adult novel. And the second one being The Great Gatsby by Fitzgerald. Now, while you all probably know The Great Gatsby, some of you may not be as familiar with Feed. So David's going to take some time just to familiarize you with that novel. Oh, and while he's doing that, we've got two copies you can look at.
Yes. Well, you guys are looking through the copies of Feed by M.T. Anderson. It's a great new YA lit. It takes place in sort of like a futuristic USA, where it's narrated by Titus, this is Titus's MySpace page that we created. Titus is a narrator, and he's really like the leader of this group of kids that are all in different relationships. It's really almost like a character novel where the future almost has a character itself. The really interesting thing about Feed, going off of the title, is that all the characters, all the people in the book, are connected to this thing called the feed, which is almost like an internet inside your mind. You can chat with friends, instant message if you guys are familiar, email, check your favorite websites, order stuff online from your favorite shop or anything like that. It's really just really the cool internet inside your mind. Now, like with all good things, stuff starts happening and the feed goes bad to this girl, Violet, who is essentially Titus's girlfriend in the book. We thought that MySpace would be a great way to really examine the characters in Feed, and also later The Great Gatsby, because, well, for Feed is a futuristic novel and really lends itself well to the futuristic setting that is MySpace. And to also introduce you to the book feed, I'm going to play this podcast that I created for one of my classes at Grand Valley. A podcast, the way we're using it now, is almost like an audio trailer for a book to really get you acquainted with the book, the language of the book, the style, and almost what happens to the book. It's an audio trailer, so here it is. It's kind of quiet, so.
What's a podcast?
A podcast, normally, like, you can do a podcast over something like iTunes. Usually a podcast is updated, like, every week, a few days and stuff like that. It's almost...
It's like a weekly broadcast. Really, it's kind of an incorrect usage of the term, though, because this is just a sound recording, a one-time sound recording that David's group prepared to advertise the book.
This one that we are going to show you now is, like I said, an audio trailer, almost like you would view a movie trailer for a movie. It kind of gives you like an idea what the book's about. So.
And we haven't talked about any of the components of MySpace, but later on when we talk about blogs, David will show you there's a way to upload sound items like this on there. So this is right on Titus's blog.
Yeah, here it goes.
What would it be like having a computer chip implanted in your brain? In the not-so-distant future, those who can afford it are all connected to the feed, a transmitter broadcasting crucial information, like the sales of your favorite store, the latest hairstyles, and how to accessorize the cool legions everyone's been getting. With the help of the feed, you can chat with your friends without your teacher noticing and watch your favorite shows anytime, anywhere. Enter the world of Titus and his friends, the ideal feed consumers.
What's the name of that part? Aaron Knapp confused. I was like, you can be big, really big. And I was like, whoa, unit, moon, goddamn moon. And instead there was just the rockets, the suckers, and the creators all being full of over and shit.
Based on the true story of a clone fighting to save her home liver from the cruel and ruthless original nature versus nurture, a primus prime time cast.
And then I met Violet, a big shame on her. Her face was like, I don't know, it was beautiful. It wasn't the way, I guess it wasn't just the way it looked like and how she was standing. I stood there wondering what it was that made her so beautiful. Her spine. Maybe it was her spine. Like, her spine was, I didn't know her spine was like... And then there was like this old creepy guy at the club. He must have been at least 100 years old and he was wearing this gross dirty jacket. He's totally acting that everyone's being like all in and out. Violet's feet is still mag broken. Violet says that she like is going to try and resist the feed. She's gonna like check out all this mag weird stuff, like camping lanterns, HMI spells, and some novels with some dudes chanting and like, oh, why would anybody want to do that? Doesn't she want to be able to shop all the time and get all the brag sales and stuff, like at Weather King Drops? And like, how else is she gonna know how to do her hair? Going off the feed is totally no. She's totally gonna miss out on all the soaps. Like, oh wow, hey.
What would happen if you decided to
You'll never guess what's been happening to Violet.
feed by M.T. Anderson?
Alright, that was our podcast. Sorry for the lack of loudness. Just to sum that up, what we tried to do is really give like an audio trailer for the book. We tried to incorporate the language that was in the book. It's kind of a really teeny bopper, I guess you would say, language, futuristic style. Just incorporate a lot of things that were in the book and try to give the reader, if you haven't read the book, a sense of what it was about and make you want to read the book. I also include the script here if you guys want to check it out. But to think about MySpace in a way of teaching it, it's really interesting to think about how MySpace essentially could become the character itself, for instance, Titus. the way we think about it is that there are a ton of little spaces within the spaces of MySpace. For instance, here, on the surface of the character, we can see Titus's picture, or what we think when we made it that he would look like, which is a really neat thing to do because when you're reading the book, there's no pictures in it. So it's really nice to see that. What we did was just Google search a picture and just upload it on there. In this About Me blurb section, just read, I'm Titus, I'm in school, just trademark, and I love riding shocks off uninsulated wires. When I'm not partying, I'm like probably totally bored with my parents or with my brother's smell factor. If I look out of it, I'm only chatting. So by doing this, by filling out the About Me section, and there's another one, who would I like to meet? We didn't fill that out. But by filling this out, you can really get inside the character on one of the surfaces that MySpace provides us. If you scroll down a little bit. Here we see Titus's interests, which really, by filling this out, forces the student to think critically about the book in many ways. We can see his general interests, which are my up car, partying, chatting, and riding shocks off uninsulated wires. Music, what the feed tells me to listen to. Films, like the feed knows what I like, okay? It tells me what movies I should watch and stuff. And by doing this, the students really have to focus on what the text is about, really read the text, and really think about what the character means to them. And that's a really cool thing. You can see Titus's details. He's in a relationship with Violet, so we click that. Yes. These are Titus's friends. There are many ways you can do the friends on here. Bethany will show you some later. But the way I did it, I just added most of the characters in this little group, this little gang that's in school. I added them to Titus's MySpace. Yes. Another layer, actually, within MySpace, are these things called the wall posts.
Oh, okay. And before David gets into what wall posts might look like in the novel Feed, I just started using MySpace 2 months ago, so I have a little bit more of a beginner's aspect perspective. And I kind of, when I first started using MySpace, I saw the wall post as one of the most confusing genres to understand. And if you use it incorrectly sometimes when you're actually using it in your social stratosphere, whatever you want to call it, you can embarrass yourself. So I thought I'd just kind of take some time to talk about what a wall post is and what it isn't. When thinking about literature, we can kind of think about character dialogue, like they're interacting, they're talking to each other, but it's a little bit different than dialogue. It's a little bit different than email. It's kind of a thing all in of itself. Wall posts are posted on the page of the person you're talking to. So other people post on your page, on your wall, and they leave the comment for you to then read. Posts are often brief, so you don't want to write, a whole long thing on their wall because you'll bog down their wall. They also often refer to something that happened in real time. So you can think of the wall post as reflecting other parts of the character's life that are happening not on the wall. And you can ask short questions that get short answers, and that's about all it's really kind of acceptable. So if you think about me friending David now, as an example, and I might say something to David on his wall like, hey David, are you going to class tomorrow? Short question, right? And then he would click over on my page, and he might write back, yeah, why, do you need me to take notes? And then I would click on his page, and I would write, yeah, could you do that for me? I've got a doctor appointment. Something like that. It's short stuff that refers to real life. And so that might be kind of important to think about while we're looking at what sorts of posts characters might actually post on each other's wall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you scroll down a little bit, like she said, the wall posts really are a genre of writing within MySpace. For Feed, I sort of created a kind of dialogue. I focused on dialogue really on these wall posts. Can you scroll down?
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of these wall posts, just like in the beginning of the book, if any of you are familiar, everything's kind of happy-go-lucky. There's really nothing wrong with the feed. Here you can see Violet posting on Titus's wall, again, Titus's girlfriend. It says, hey, what's doing? I wish I was with you today. I always wish I was with you. Oh, did you read my list? And Violet has this thing. She's a very artsy person. She has a list that she has made that we'll look at a little bit later of all these things that she wants to do before she dies. So she posted that on her MySpace that we'll look at later. But if you scroll up a little bit, we can see all these posts on here from his little brother's Smell Factor, your blog like Meg sucks. Funny things like that that really you don't have to do. I just thought I'd add a little bit of depth. But as we get back up here to kind of the end of the comments that I posted, we see Violet in the book. As the book goes on, Violet gets a little distracted, so to speak, because her feed is malfunctioning. So she's trying to resist the feed by thinking random thoughts, because the feed ultimately goes off what you're thinking. It will, you know, if you say like you went on Amazon.com and you like searched a CD, it will essentially like give you CDs that are in that genre. She is trying to go outside of her world and like look at different things. So here she's talking. It says, Titus, I hope you read my list. These incantations were dreamed by my woman. And it just goes on and on. It's all kind of like nonsense stuff. And then the last sentence says, let's go on a ride in your up car again. So it's kind of just like she's trying to resist the feed. And the wall posts are a really great way to show that, because they kind of mirror what the book is going for. They're really cool. Next, we're going to look at blogs, which for Titus.
Do you want Titus' blog?
Yeah, let's go to Titus' blog. For Titus, like you saw, I uploaded the podcast I did. I use this thing called Gcast. I believe it's just gcast.com or something. You can Google search it or email me about that. But yes, Gcast is this really cool thing. I just uploaded the podcast here. You can play it. There's no problems except for I had trouble making it loud. But if you go back, I also posted the script to this that we typed up online and just posted that. What I want to show you by doing this is that the blog can really feature multiple assignments. It can actually, this is probably my favorite part of the MySpace. You can do classroom assignments on there if you want them to write a persuasive essay or anything like that. Really focus on the character, do like character analysis, or write letters from the character, just anything. It would be great and would lend itself well to MySpace. Now, if we go over to Violet's page, Violet's Titus' girlfriend, you can see that we've done her feed a little bit differently. About me, the feed sucks. It's kind of just like her page. It's very different from Titus' page. Again, you really have to go inside the character and become the character, which really helps you understand the novel altogether. But if we go up to Violet's blog, this is her list of things that she wants to do. And you can see it has simple things like dancing, and then number 2 reads, fly over an active volcano, spit stuff into magma. It just goes on, and there's just a ton of like crazy stuff, and it's really interesting to read because you really get a sense of who the character is, much more so than just by reading the book, which really lends itself up. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I guess Bethany is going to talk about The Great Gatsby now as part of MySpace. I, for one of my classes, created a lesson plan surrounding Jake Reinvented, which has anybody read that book before? Yeah. Jake Reinvented is kind of like a younger, a YA lit in forms of, it's kind of like The Great Gatsby. It's just The Great Gatsby in forms of like the teenage population. It's about this guy Jake that throws lavish parties and stuff like that. It just mirrors Great Gatsby. So I created a lesson plan that started off teaching Jake Reinvented on MySpace. It's kind of like an intro to The Great Gatsby, and I'll pass this around for you guys to see so that you can actually see how it can be implemented in the classroom. Jake, I don't know. It's on my cover. Gordon Corman.
Cool. All right, so while you guys are perusing David's lesson plan, I wanted to demonstrate how this might look on MySpace, a classic text, for 2 reasons. Number 1 being the fact that just because Feed is a futuristic novel isn't the only reason why it works on MySpace. Other books that have characters work just as well. It's all about character exploration. And the second reason is I wanted to show that these different spaces within MySpace are flexible to whatever you feel would be helpful to your classroom. They're completely, you could do whatever you want with them. This is just the beginning. So you can see I picked a picture of Jay Gatsby. I think that was one of the movies that actually portrayed him, so that wasn't too hard. But some of these other ones, I went ahead and searched just for characteristics I felt they had. Sorry, Myrtle's not very time period, but I thought she had the right attitude. So, so you can see that I I really try to concentrate on, The Great Gatsby has a lot of deception. The narrator is kind of deceiving you in parts. Gatsby's obviously deceiving a lot of people. So I saw these first surface spaces as a place where the characters need to be deceiving us too. They're advertising, they're putting up a front. So you can see that Gatsby's saying, I'm an Oxford man and a veteran war hero. I've spent my days wandering about the world like a young Raja and trying to forget something very sad that happened to me long ago. I aspire for one dream and one woman only. In the meantime, I love to throw beautiful parties. I treat all my guests very well, so be sure to come enjoy my mansion and don't forget to invite your friends. And who we'd like to meet is old money. And also it requires that the students guess at what age the characters would be. I saw Gatsby's being 32 or something. If you want to scroll down a bit to general interests, he's got, the usual things: throwing extravagant parties, taking scenic drives, gazing at the green light from the end of Daisy Buchanan's dock, so you get kind of a sense of what he's like. His favorite music is live jazz ensembles. The bands at my parties are the best. When asked about his favorite books, he says, I have a very impressive library. And if you want to scroll down a little bit further, I struggled with what Gatsby would give as his occupation. So I decided that he would say he's a self-made businessman. And he's also got on there that he graduated from Oxford. So you can see some of that going on. I'm starting to hide behind this, but there's just a lot of clicking to do, so try to excuse me, I guess. The only other page I really developed was Nick's. You can see how he looks much younger, a little bit more innocent. He talks about how he just moved here, talks about, and he gives us kind of the sense of that opening scene where he says, I pride myself in my ability to reserve all judgment when meeting new people. People tend to trust and confide in me because of this, so he's setting himself up as what kind of person he is. And what I decided to do differently about the friends was I decided to be selective about who would associate with whom. So you can see that, and you can also rank friends on here. So you can think about who would be most important to each character. Obviously on Gatsby's page, Daisy's #1 on his list, with Nick as a close second because they're getting to be close friends. Nick's close with Jordan because they start to have a thing, and with Jay as close second. If you look at Daisy's page, and the great thing about this too is you establish the mood and the personality of the character with the background, so it's very flowery, elegant. She's got her husband as #1, even though that might not be the case, at least to put up the front of it. Jordan's best friend, thing like that. Jordan, you've got the fact that she's a golfer. She looks like a little feminine athlete there. And now Tom, with Tom we get into some subcategories of friends here, where you start to be able to portray the fact that there's some characters that are associating with each other in ways that other characters are not aware. So we got Daisy as #1 here, but we got the mistress as #2. And Myrtle's page is very flamboyant, I guess. She says, and she is, I kind of saw her as just openly adulterous with no shame whatsoever. So she says, I am just a grown woman with dreams that die hard. I married the wrong man, what can I say? He doesn't even notice that I don't love him. He's hopeless. I know that I deserve more money and more recognition than George could ever give me. That is why my face lights up when I see Tom Buchanan come around. And then if we go to poor George's page here, he just got a garage in the background, and his only friends are his wife and Tom, because he's always around to see his wife. So you can kind of give a sense of what the characters' social networks are like. Now something that we haven't talked about yet, and I'm not going to actually be able to show you today just because you have to be logged into the character to see this, is a private message. And we're thinking about dramatic irony or secretive things going on in the novel. It becomes kind of hard to portray that just with the elements that we've seen so far. So some of the characters can send private messages to each other where other characters wouldn't be able to read them, wouldn't be able to hear them. And that's pretty easy to pick up on when you open your account. But for now, I have, For now, I've just kind of put in parentheses private message, so we'll have to use our imagination, but so that's what that means. So you can have Myrtle writing a private message to Tom, saying things like, you know, run away with me and leave your wife, and I know we'd be so happy, and that kind of thing with a private message. I've chosen one part of the model, or of the novel, to go into more depth with this idea of portraying dramatic irony, and I chose, sorry, can't remember. Okay, it starts with that. I chose the scene where Gatsby sets up his arrangement to see Daisy for the first time. So you can see, and sorry, this is going to be a lot of clicking back and forth, but just to prepare it. We're on Nick's page, so Gatsby's saying a quick thing to Nick, and then it's kind of going to go back and forth. So you can see not only the sequence of the dialogue, but who's let into which parts of the dialogue and who's not. Gatsby posts on Nick's page, he says, "I've got a large favor to ask of you, old sport. Miss Baker has kindly consented to speak to you about it this afternoon." And then if we click on Jay's page to see what he said to Nick, and yes, when you're on MySpace, you do kind of do this to see what your friends are up to. Nick says to Gatsby, "Why does it have to come through Miss Baker? I don't like mysteries." Oops, okay. And then on Nick's page, Gatsby said, "Don't worry about it, old sport. It's nothing underhand. Miss Baker is a great sportswoman, and she'd never do anything that wasn't all right." So that's the end of that, but we can see that later that afternoon, Jordan posts a private post, and using our imaginations here. "Thanks for the talk this afternoon. I can't stop thinking about you. Remember to invite Daisy over, but don't tell her about Gatsby arranging it. He doesn't want her to know." Then later on, we see the phone call that Nick makes to Daisy the next morning. "Good morning, Daisy. How would you like to come over for tea tomorrow?" And we see Daisy's response, "I would absolutely love to, dearest one. At what time should I have Ferdy drop me by?" And on Daisy's page, Nick says, "How about 4 o'clock? Oh, and don't bring Tom." And we get some of Daisy's playfulness with this comment back. She says, "What? Who is Tom? Why do I have to come alone? Are you in love with me? I'll see you tomorrow, darling." So you can, and that's just a very small part of how kids can kind of interact with what some of those sneaky plans in the book would look like on MySpace. Is there anything else that we're reading for questions?
So, we really just want to stress the fact that MySpace, although it is a social network, can really be used in the classroom. For instance, in my lesson plan, that I don't know where it is right now, but I do have actual assignments. The students are required to post on the blog. I do have, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a strict assignment, but there is, it is an assignment and there are requirements for it. Students really, I have my students set up in groups where there's a group of about like 6 people I envisioned talking about this character, really focusing on the character, and then talking as a class as these characters, so they really get a sense of what the novel is all about. Yes. So we're obviously.
How does the teacher access this to know what the students are doing?
We have, on MySpace, you can actually, it's very, if you want it to be, it can be very private. There are a ton of privacy settings. I pointed out a few on your handouts that you have.
But basically, I mean, as far as like teachers being able to assess what's going on, we've included URLs, so you can go ahead. I think we included the one for Gatsby and then for Titus, so you can peruse this at your leisure if you want. You can, anybody can see these pages. If you're wanting kids to have things that to where nobody else can see them, there's that setting available as well. But all you would need is just to be their friend, for instance, so that maybe like only book characters and then the teacher could see things.
The way, sorry for interrupting, the way I envision it is that you can actually create, what we created for the Titus MySpace project was that we simply created email addresses for the characters. For instance, Titus is titus.feed@gmail.com. So we created Gmail accounts for all the characters, and all the characters have the same password. So you essentially would be able to go into each character when the students are not, and check out what they're doing, see all the private conversations, do everything like that. So really, I mean, you have more control than it seems for these MySpace pages.
So that way you can see what's behind what you're seeing right now, the administrators type stuff for each student as well.
Yes.
So is this a project, or you actually use this to teach your books?
This is just a project. In my lesson plan, I taught the Jake Reinvented is a kind of pre-unit for The Great Gatsby. We haven't actually took this into the classroom yet,
Okay.
but yeah. Any other questions? You have
What do you guys see as being like the biggest potential problem with this?
I think in my personal opinion, I think the main problem is actually getting it into the schools. I think that would be the biggest problem. But once, if you get past that, get your administration on board and stuff like that, I really think that MySpace is one of the best ways out there to really examine a novel or just anything in terms of like the characterization of the novel. Because you really get a sense, if you're working in groups or individually, of the character, and by doing that you can access information about the novel that you otherwise couldn't. I just think that getting it into the schools would be your biggest issue, and once it's in there, I think if you provide a proper argument for your administration, it will be a big problem. But
Well, the problem is once they unblock it, like our school has it blocked off the servers, then they get to any MySpace account they
Yes.
want, not
Well,
necessarily the one you're teaching. Right?
yes, we've tried to come up with different alternatives to MySpace. You can create blogs for your classroom. There's various other sites. We've heard about teachers creating PowerPoints.
Forums on PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So.
But they're really not as effective as MySpace, because MySpace, there's all these different things. You can link to characters. Each character has their own page. You can add different pictures. Really get inside the character and just think about this page right here as a character itself. I mean, this is the character. You really get inside the character and inside the book. There's really not a good alternative for that. So you would, in order to do this project, really have to implement MySpace.
It's I mean, that's what it was designed for. It's designed to be a social networking tool. So of course we can kind of simulate it with other things, but
Yes.
it might not be as smooth.
Yeah, like we said, if you actually get it into the classroom and you are allowed to use it, there's really no problem with privacy or with
It's just the
spam
issue,
with inside
right.
MySpace, because there's really not a lot. There are ads when you log in and stuff like that, but once you get past the login point and stuff like this, even the character, the managing page and stuff like that, there's really not too many ads or pop-ups that you have to worry about. You will, as a teacher, be able to really control and just see what your students are doing at all times. It's really, I mean, people are making it a bigger issue than it really is.
Is there any way to block other than our students from getting?
Yes, yep, you can make all your student accounts if you make them. You can make them unaccessible to other people unless they're their friends. So say Daisy tried to look at Titus's profile. They're not friends, so she couldn't see anything except maybe his picture and name if they weren't friends. She can look at anything. She can look at his messages, his about me, and you really can't do anything. You can't send him messages. It'd be almost like they didn't exist.
Kind of a contained social bubble. That's what you can create.
Yes.
So in the classroom, you'd have multiple students taking on these characters from the play then, and each creating their own page? Or are you suggesting that one person would put together this entire project and think about it from multiple perspectives? I'm just asking practically, how would you put this in the
What I
classroom?
envision is, I have a groups, like I said, about 5 or 6 kids, depending on the class size, that really, for instance, Nick, the group would be Nick. They all would contribute to this page because it's not really time consuming, but a lot has to go into it. A lot of thought goes into it. Students have to think critically about the text. They really have to understand the text. So all these students are thinking about the page, really collaborating together as a group to come up with the page and stuff like that, and comments and blogs. And the students could essentially post blogs separately, have their own writing assignments. I did that in my project, I believe, and post them separately on the blogs. You can post as many blogs as you want.
I suppose you could always double or triple cast it if
Yeah.
you wanted each student to do their own.
Yep.
You know, maybe just assign, okay, you guys are characters number 1 and characters number 2. I don't know.
Yes, there's a lot of ways you can do it. Any other questions?
I
I got one back here. I like this because, and these are my students, so I'm biased, of course. I like this because it seems to me that every literary text is about complex relationships between characters. Gatsby is the perfect example with all the backstabbing and the conniving going on, but Shakespeare. Imagine Richard III in my space. I might actually be able to figure out who all the characters are if I could see them laid out in relationship to each other. So I think the potential here is really remarkable if, and this is where this question comes in, if you can talk about it with your administrators, and that's a big part of the battle. But I think something, and this is turning from a question into a rant, but I think something has to counter this full-blown media scare over MySpace, a media scare that has led to Congress creating legislation. So even if you could perhaps get access to MySpace, legislation coming down the wire is going to ban all social networking from schools. So I think this is a piece of that, and that's why I'm happy to be here with Bethany and David today, because they're envisioning this in a very academic kind of way, tapping into this naturally occurring literacy behavior that so many adolescents are into, and trying to use it in a way to get them back into some classic literature and YA literature.
That's what you're saying about trying to legislate this out of the schools. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we block it, but kids have 600 proxy servers.
That's right.
They hit a proxy, they're on MySpace. I mean, it's a fallacy to think that they can keep this out of the schools without banning it from the internet, which can't happen. But the issue becomes if we are trying to use it in our classroom and the district prohibits it from being accessed. I mean, my kids get on my computer lab and know there's 9 MySpace things. Yeah, so we can't keep them off it, but whether we can convince them to make it legitimate so that we can use it and ask them to go on to it is going to be a big problem.
But something like this becomes a piece of that argument, right? You know, like look at the way that we're illustrating dramatic irony. Instead of just having students memorize a definition, you can actually visualize it in this way. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you see all of this work going on in the classroom? How do you address the fact that all students don't have access to, for instance, speed that would be required to use this kind of technology?
All students right now basically are familiar with MySpace because it is a social network. A lot of people have them. And I urge you, if some of you do not have a MySpace, I urge you to go on and just check it out, just because it's not what you think it is.
No question.
Yes, no, I understand. I'm sorry. The way I did it in my lesson plan, sorry to keep going back to that, but students had access to computer labs in schools. I know not every school has a computer lab or has access to computers, so that would pose a problem. In that case, you could do, alternatives, have it like a paper MySpace page or something like that. You just have to be a little bit creative. But yeah, students would have time in the computer lab because, of course, it does take time on the computer to do this. They would also have time in class to prepare for that. They would write their blog entries in class, stuff like that. Really have group conversations in class. A lot of it will go on in the class and in the computer lab. Does that kind of answer your question?
You could always prepare, some of this, and then if lab time was limited, post it later on.
The value is the conversation
Yeah.
about what goes on it.
Yes.
Thanks.
I guess one thing too, just thinking about when you said they would prepare their blogs before, are these things that they would write, before they would do it, or are they just going to do it right on the?
No, well, they
So you
can.
have-
I just think that would be a little bit harder to do because what we're after here is really critical responses to the text, and like we did it in form of the character from the character's perspective. But in order to do that, they would have to spend time in the classroom, whether it be like in a writing group or a writing circle or whatever like that, just focusing on the text and really, writing down good responses. If they have to do that like a few times, do a rough draft or anything like that, that's fine, as long as they, it's a really good solid piece of work.
Well, and so it seems to me too that not only just the writing, but even the conversations, like you said, the conversations that they would have in that small group would be
Yes. what this is
Really
about. Like,
important,
yeah,
yeah.
the MySpace page is just one aspect of this project. It's what the whole project surrounds itself around. But really, just like there's so many spaces within MySpace, there's so many components to this project: the writing, the conversation, the group work, stuff that really lends itself really well to the classroom and what I hope to do in the future. Any more questions? Like we said, we included the URLs on the handout. You can go in and check these out. If you want, if any of you are really interested, I can give you my email address and I can send you the password so you can really check it out and go in there and look at what it's all about. But other than that, thank you for coming.